So as we already said, we would like to thank you for joining today for the HTTP for WASH webinar. We are very excited because this has been a great project that all of us, USAID, ProWASH, and IDE have been working together towards creating exciting and useful website for WASH practitioners. So thank you for joining again. Next slide, please, Bella. So for the agenda, we will walk you through the project background to give you more information why we started this in the first place. The methodology that we use, which you already know, that is human-centered design, but we will explain a little bit more or very briefly what is HCD, and then the process that we follow, what were the findings, and basically what were those findings that led us to the website. We will give you a brief tutorial of the website, and then a great case study. And lastly, we'll have some time for Q&A. If you have some questions, you can also drop them in the chat. Next slide. So again, we are delighted that you joined us today. As a background, we would like to explain to you why are we here today. So today is about the much needed learning resource platform that we built together with ProWASH. And as a background, in 2020, we IDE piloted an HCD tool called the Tanitations Possibility Map, which is a combination of ProWASH and different partners. And participants wanted to learn and create and share possibilities. But the most important part here is that they also wanted to know how to execute those possibilities. So the how is what led us to building a learning resource that explains how HCD can be used for WASH practitioners. So as I mentioned, we are very happy to be presenting today the result of around 1 year project towards building HCD for WASH. Next slide, please. So the objective of the project, so that was the background, and moving forward, the objective was to make human-centered design more exciting and useful and accessible to all of you that you are joining us today. And we created an online learning resource that is in both in English and in French. And we would like to provide, or the website is providing, on-demand access to different tutorials or existing resources or HCD tools that we practitioners use. And we wanted to share those tools and those practices that we use more commonly used, and we wanted to extend that to you, to WASH practitioners. The next slide, please. So what is the methodology that we use? Well, of course, we use HCD, which is the human-centered design. And as you know, and if you don't know, HCD is a methodology that puts the people at the center, and the people meaning the users are going to be using this, the product or the service that you're going to be designing for. So the methodology uses a variety of different approaches. So as you know, and if you've been part of the research for building this website, you were part of some of the surveys or some of the testing, some of the early testing that we did at the beginning. You help us to co-design the material the website that we're going to be showing in a minute. And also you were part of the rapid prototyping that we did. So we use a variety of different approaches to really understand what actually users desire, what is viable, and what is technically feasible. We also would like to understand the deep understanding of people needs and motivations and behaviors behind the things that you do and understanding why you do it. So by involving the target community, we want to do this iterative testing phases so solutions become more sustainable and scalable. Next slide, please. What were the research methods and findings that we use? So in this case, this is a summary. As I said, this was a 1 year project. So I just want to give you the gist of it. So the research methods and tools, they were kind of like this. This is kind of like the steps that we follow. So from 54 explorative workshop with key informant users that some of you were part of it. So from organizations such as USAID or ProWASH or the Man of Group or Catholic Relief Services from IDE and so on. So thank you again to all of you that were part of this explorative key informant users that help us to understand better what you need and what you want. And then from there, we did 30 in-depth interviews asking you what are your behaviors, what are the needs, what are the motivations, and what are the barriers that you have when you want to access HTTP tools as a WASH practitioner. From there, we review 17 existing resources. So these 17 existing resources were a part of toolkits and methodologies, even courses or materials that you use when you want to access HTTP. These materials were shared by you. So we were able to either do some desk research on our own, but also this was part of your input to us. Later, we did early testing existing resources. Again, we wanted to know what works for you, what doesn't work. So some of you share these 4 existing resources that we were able to hone a little bit more to really understand what is out there and what can we leverage from that, or what can we also avoid from other resources that are out there. From there, we jump into the testing. So we created some mockups, and we wanted to understand from you what is the best user experience that you would like to have when you go through this resource. So we asked different people to organize a website based on their preferences, and you help us to build the first sitemap of this website. And lastly, we did 2 rounds of user testing, and we created a map of the website, and then we ask you to go through it to really understand what are these wireframes, or if I may say, what are these kind of step-by-step that you can test, that we wanted to test the usability of this website. So really to make your wayfinding more accessible to a variety of users. So as you can see, it was kind of like a distilling information, like from 54, we ended up with 2. Next slide, please. So what are the key barriers that we found? The key barriers were 3, as you can remember. And again, I cannot thank you enough for the people that were part of this process. So we found 3 key barriers, or 3 main challenges. The first one was integrating HTTP in the current organizational structure. And the way of doing this or the way that we tackle this challenge through the website was just taking this mindset out that HTTP is not for WASH practitioners. So we created a video showing you how WASH practitioners are already using HTTP, or how you can use it. We also have examples and inspiration, and you're going to hear from Jess and Delilah, 2 of our panelists, how this is possible. The second challenge is advocating and demonstrating the value of HTTP in a WASH program. Again, how we do it, or how we tackle this in the website, we want to change the perceived value of HTTP. So we created another video to explain to you what is the value of HTTP in a WASH program, and also how you can use that in very specific points across the WASH program cycle. And lastly, recognizing and embedding HTTP methods in a WASH program. So about this, we wanted to, it was like complicated design terminology, or also existing toolkits are lacking of intuitive user experience, that it was just made for designers. In this case, what we wanted to do, or what we tried to do, is help you to understand the HTTP process in very specific points that you would need at the right time, at the right moment. So this is another way that we tackle this challenge. Next slide, please. And the drivers, this is kind of a 7-point driver that we are portraying here. But again, we found a lot of those drivers. And the drivers that are going to be leveraged in the digital tool, or that we already leverage in the digital tool, is we prioritize incremental HTTP adoption. So we are not asking you to learn all the HTTP, but we are providing you the tools at the right time for you to adopt HTTP when you need it the most. We also want to explain to you in different videos what is the right mindset that is necessary to unlock the change. Also, we are providing you with the HED tools and solve immediate challenges. And lastly, we have some toolkits that are framed around different themes and organized by topics. And my colleague Max is going to walk you through what are those themes and organized topics that are going to make sense for WASH practitioners that are not designers. Next slide, please. So very happy to share to you the first HED for WASH. Well, it's not the first one, but it's the first one that we create for WASH practitioners leveraging HED tools. So over to you, Max.
Great. We're going to do a quick swap of screen share. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome to HCD for WASH. This is the landing page or the home page. And as you can see, there is a video to introduce the website. And this is the exact same video translated in both English and French. So on the top right, for a French-speaking community, you will have the ability to select French, and this video, when you start playing it, as in all the language on the website, is voiced in French with French subtitles. That will be the same case for the entire website. So there are many cool features that we are excited about. One of the first ones is that if you come to the website with a specific search idea in mind, and you want to go straight to a resource about what you're looking for, then you can do that with a simple search here. So for example, if I want to search for a type of journey map of some kind, or I am curious about a customer journey, I can click that and it jumps to a resource about journey mapping. And I will talk about the resource page in just a moment, but we're excited about the quick feature with the search. The next element we're excited about is if you come to this website and you are really curious about just learning about human-centered design, that is the first major element that we're excited to share with everyone. You can access that either from the home page in this menu here or at the top. It's the same thing to get there. Each of these pages has an introduction video to tell you what that section of the site is about. And then as we go down, About HCD is made up of a series of values, the lenses of human-centered design, all of which are clickable. Same with the values. And you can see expanded text after that, which we're excited about. One of the coolest features of this part of the website is breaking down the phases of human-centered design, so discover, create, and deliver, into a series of values to your projects. So for example, learning from your intended audience. If you click on this and go even further, you can see we have categorized all of the methods and tools that IDE has ever used regarding human-centered design in our WASH projects into each of these sections. So if you're curious about how to conduct a focus group, you can access this from the Discover tab in this menu. Similarly to the search feature on the home page, when you click Get Tool, you will be taken to the resource page and will have access to the focus group tool. And again, I'll focus on the tools page in just one moment because we're extremely excited about that. If you join the website, rather than wanting to learn about the design process itself, but instead you're curious about how it fits into WASH projects, you can do that as well. And this was a big design criteria of ours based on interviews and conversations with practitioners. To reiterate what Melissa was saying, of course, the theory and the design process is great, but the ability to apply it in WASH projects practically is the most important element. So you'll see an introduction video, again, both in English and in French, if you switch to the French version of the website. There is a section here about research ethics in human-centered design, which I wanted to highlight in particular, because it's an extremely important part of the work when you're considering using human-centered design. Very similar to the About HCD page, the HCD in WASH projects page consists of planning and then using HCD, both of which have options that expand to different tools and methods that are used at different parts of a WASH project. I'm going to skip examples and inspiration for a moment, and we'll come right back to that. And I want to highlight one of the most powerful features of the website, which is the tools and resources page. So we have been working diligently compiling a lot of literature about design case studies related to WASH, tools, templates, academic articles, all sorts of things you can see here that we have compiled onto the sites, available both in French and in English. I want to highlight in particular the templates that we have. Everything on here, if it is a tool or a method that IDE has used in the past regarding design, is available for you to download either in a PDF format, or we're particularly excited that they're all available in an editable format as well. Right now, that's in the form of a PowerPoint or a presentation slide, given some of the graphics and text layout. So you have a choice with all of these to download the PDF version, and you'll see an introduction to the tool, its particular use in a WASH project, at least how IDEs used it or other practitioners have used it in the past. And then for each one, there will be a series of steps to be able to do that tool or that method in your own project. So we're extremely excited about this, this feature in general. You can also filter your search by different phases of the human-centered design process. If you're particularly curious about other resources, we've also made it possible to access links to other particularly famous or well-known design-related resources, such as IDEO's course, UNICEF's Human-Centered Design for Health course, and so on. All of these, you'll notice they say learn more instead of download, and that's because it will take you to an external site. We wanted to make sure that we don't ignore the incredible and in-depth body of work that has already been done related to human-centered design. So this is the tools page. Lastly, let's jump to the examples. Oh, there we go. The examples and inspiration page. So the other scenario we recognize is common among practitioners is understanding what types of projects and what types of case studies are out there related to how human-centered design has been used in WASH projects. So for this, you'll see an introduction video similar to the others. And then based on feedback and user input we received during the design process, the sort of star case studies, we will call them, are broken down into water, sanitation, and hygiene projects. So if I click on water, well, that's right here anyway, you'll see it jumps to the couple of case studies that we have related to water. We can highlight the first one here, and then if you click on the other one, it switches case study below. That's how the feature works. For each one, you'll see a short narrative about the project, what its goals were, and so forth. Particularly important, though, is we wanted to highlight the specific HCD tools and methods used in each of these case study projects. Where we have a template for a particular tool that was mentioned, you'll be able to click on any of these hyperlinks and it will immediately take you to that tool so you can download it for yourself and hopefully use it in a similar way as was used in the case study. So we've done this for all of the case study projects across water, sanitation, and hygiene. I am going to pause there because this is actually a nice transition into a longer discussion about human-centered design in the Takunda project. So with that, this is your quick introduction to human-centered design for WASH. We're extremely excited about it. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jess to share about how some human-centered design methods were used in an actual project. Thank you all. Let me stop sharing.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Max. Excellent. So my name is Jess MacArthur. For those I haven't had the pleasure to meet, I am currently working as a WASH and HCD consultant with ProWASH for the next, I don't know, few hours until the end of this year. But I had the pleasure of working in Zimbabwe with the Takunda program, which is a RIFSA looking at several districts and several provinces within rural Zimbabwe. And so I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the process that we used, and then going to be handing over to my colleague Delilah, who is going to share a little bit of her experience from the Takunda side. Next slide. So this particular HCD research project had 4 objectives. We first wanted to understand the preferences for latrine designs and the different types of latrine designs that might be valuable. Second, we wanted to understand how local entrepreneurs were working in this latrine construction space. Third, we wanted to look at financing options for households and businesses and look at how feasible the financing was for these different latrine options. And finally, fourth, we were looking at private sector partnerships. Originally, we started with looking at just existing partnerships, but now we're also looking at new partnerships. Next slide. So we used human-centered design. I love human-centered design, and I think it's an incredibly valuable tool for the WASH sector. You'll see a slightly different wording. We used the here, create, deliver instead of discover, create, and deliver. But essentially, it was the exact same process as you see on the website. The website wasn't done when we started this research. Next slide. So we had our HCD guiding question. Often these guiding questions are written as how might we statements. And so our how might we was how might we motivate safe and sustainable latrine construction and use in Takunda target communities. You'll notice that the safe and is in brackets, and that's because this was an emerging piece of information that we found that the safety of latrines was actually a significant challenge in these areas. And so we adapted our how might we statement to include the word safe. Next slide. So moving into the discover or this here phase. So we did what we call deep dive research on the HCD for WASH website. This is called the sprint, and it's basically an in-depth research, ethnographic type research practice where you go, instead of trying to get quantitative breadth, you're looking for qualitative depth. So instead of doing 150 villages and working in 150 spaces, we picked 5 villages of varying sanitation coverage in different areas of the program. And again, we were looking for depth. So we wanted to understand as much as possible how latrines are being accessed and constructed in these areas. We also looked at 2 local growth points. In Zimbabwe, a growth point is kind of like a local town or a local zone where markets are. And so we looked at these 2 growth points, which supplied these villages as well. Next. So these are the types of activities that we did in these 5 villages. We did transect walks in the villages. We did focus group discussions, household interviews. We observed 2 community training sessions. We interviewed 11 government officials, talked to local builders, and talked to suppliers. And this was all done over the period of a month. Next. So what did we find? What did we learn? These are the technical findings. So the first finding is that the standardized, it's called the Blair Ventilated Improved Pit Latrine, or the BVIP for short, is really widely accepted by the majority of rural people. Yet there are 2 kind of groups that don't necessarily accept the latrine, and those are on the extremes from a wealth perspective. So for the very wealthy, the BVIP is seen as old-fashioned. And for the extreme poor, it's seen as too expensive. So there's a big group in the middle that are fine with the BVIP, but we're looking at those 2 extremes, the rich and the real poor. The second kind of insight is that most households are not following the government-approved upgradable approach, which means the latrine can be safe from the very beginning. So if you look at the picture, this latrine looks nice, but it's missing the roof, which means that the whole function of the VIP latrine, if you're familiar with that concept, no longer works. And so this is a nice latrine with very nice finishing. I began to call them bulletproof because there's so much plastering that you could really, they're bulletproof latrines, but they don't have roofs. And so they're no longer safe from a fly and ventilation perspective. Next slide. So there was a low-cost version of the latrine introduced about 10 years ago, but it's using 1 bag of cement. And you can see here again, we have this bulletproof kind of plastering on the outside, but there's no roof, and the vent pipe is full of holes and non-functional with no fly screen. And so this is quite common of what you would see. And so it's not really a safe latrine. It is a squat hole that is not covered, and so you have flies coming in and out. And I saw 3 people using this particular latrine while we sat and chatted with people. So these are quite commonly used. Now, most households, again, looking for this bulletproof plastering with many, many, many bags of cement, and if money, a solid roof. Next slide. There also is an uptick in the use of seats. So many households are purchasing kind of fiberglass seats. These are locally known as chambers for the latrines, motivated by elderly relatives who struggle to squat, or also a desire for prestige. But for the latrines that did have squat holes, the shapes were often very odd, which meant that the latrines were non-functional for basically everybody. So anyone using the latrine would soil the latrine floor because of the way that the squat hole was designed and shaped. And this is basically not using the standard designs that have been provided by the government of Zimbabwe. Next slide. So one of the features of the VIP is that there is actually no door on the BVIP. There's a spiral shape, but there is no door. And some women and girls, not all, but some, did desire a door, but not for the reason that you would think. They weren't really looking for a door for when they went to the toilet. They really wanted a door for when they were bathing and using the latrine for bathing purposes. And this is really teenage girls who didn't want their dad barging in while they were taking a bath, essentially. And so you see on this picture here, the latrine is open, but there's a door on the bathing room where they had a separation between the toilet and the bathing room. Another really interesting finding is that almost everyone struggled to find paper for wiping. So with the decrease of newspaper available in rural areas in Zimbabwe, there was basically nothing to wipe with, and people were using school books or often school books or leaves to wipe. And this is even the people who had more money were not able to get wiping paper. Next slide. So one of the other kind of interesting findings is that the existing materials have kind of fostered unintended behaviors and practices. So I highlight the picture on the side where you see this man coming from the hardware shop, and he has in his, what's it called, the wheelbarrow, 1 bag of cement. And so this picture has really ingrained in the psyche of many rural Zimbabweans. So when you go to the hardware shop, all you need is 1 bag of cement. And that means that there's some of the other pieces that are important, such as roofing materials, which can be made from cement, but often are not, are missing. Similar vent pipes, which can be made from cement, but often are not, are also often missing. However, the early instruction manuals, these were developed quite a long time ago, are still cherished by builders and environmental health officers and technicians. So we saw many people holding their materials from the late 80s and early 90s very gingerly, not really wanting me to touch them, not wanting our team to handle them because they're so precious, because they are so well designed and so well loved. Next slide. So what do we do? We found out all this information. What do we do with it? Next. So the first thing we did is we wanted to review and design what we're calling complementary behavior change tools. Now, because the government of Zimbabwe has really standardized participatory health tools, we didn't want to replace those. We wanted to complement them. So we've designed an animated video and poster on what makes a safe latrine, a set of cards to be used in gamifying activities for identifying unsafe latrines called Spot the Problem. We revised a revised set of sanitation option cards to help show what types of latrines can be safe, as well as an inspection checklist for government and builders alike. Next. We also designed tools for the private sector, including a poster series on latrine components to be installed at suppliers at local growth points. So basically at hardware shops. So if someone comes in and wants to buy the materials for a toilet, they know what they need to get. We also have been piloting a business model canvas to help strengthen the services of latrine builders. So moving from being just kind of construction workers to being actual builders and being able to speak to the value and the importance of different parts of the latrine. Next slide. Lastly, we updated and clarified the latrine designs and related technical documentation. So now we've put together these construction manuals for 3 different types of the BVIP. One is the basic, one is the standard, and one is the prestige. The prestige basically is if you have money, this is how you can make your latrine safe, because the number of wealthy people with unsafe latrines was almost equal to the number of poor people. And so if there's nothing to aspire to, then we're going to have issues all the way down the line. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a toilet for everyone. Next slide. What are we doing now? Well, Delilah's going to speak a bit more to this in just a moment, but we're into the deliver phase at the moment as well. So next slide. Yeah. So 4 things we're doing. The first thing is integrating these behavior change tools in community engagements. We are reimagining the role of latrine builders to be promoters as well as constructors of improved latrines. We are working with a local private sector to supply and encourage improved latrines, as well as working with the district, provincial, and national private sector to improve components. This is including the plastic parts basically, of the latrine. So this has been a whirlwind example of how we started with kind of discover or hear all the way through the deliver phase of what we're doing now in the project, of trying to understand the barriers to safe and sustainable sanitation and trying to plug those gaps. So I'd like to hand it over now to my colleague Delilah from Takunda, just to share a little bit of her experience and anything that I missed in this presentation. Oh, and this is one of the case studies that will be on the website, just in case anyone is curious to learn more. Delilah?
Thank you, Jess. And hello, everyone. As I've introduced myself in the chat, my name is Delilah Takawira. I'm the SBC lead for Takunda. I work with FHI 360, who's the social and behavior change technical partner in Takunda program. So really just to give a bit of context to this work, Takunda is a USAID funded resilience and food security activity. It's a multi-component program with three, overall objectives or purposes, as we call them. The first one looking at improving incomes, and then the second one looking at health and nutrition. And under this second pillar, this is where WASH issues are. And then the third one is more on building resilience capacities within the program communities. We work in 2 provinces in Zimbabwe, Manicaland and Masvingo, and we work in 4 districts, 2 in each of the 2 provinces. This is more in the southeast of Zimbabwe. So why and how did we get into using HCD for WASH? So the context is that Zimbabwe, I think it's got a very well developed or established WASH coordination system that dates back to the 80s. The BVIP latrine that Jessica has talked about in the presentation is something that is very well known and has been promoted in Zimbabwe over the years. There's a WASH policy and there's a WASH strategy, which is now focusing more on community-led interventions and mobilizing communities to take responsibility for their own latrine construction and use, rather than programs going and actually building latrines for people, as that has been seen to be not sustainable. So this is what the country is doing. But despite all this, our latest statistics in the country showed that open defecation remains still quite high and quite common. 12% in one of the provinces and as high as 32% actually in the Masvingo province. So as Takunda was starting and we're going through the inception phase, the idea of using HCD to try and see what would motivate for sustainable latrine construction and use in the communities we're working in came up. And this is how Takunda then partnered with ProWash, and we got Jess as an international consultant to help us in this, what we called a WASH HCD study, for us to try and understand what would motivate for sustainable latrine construction and use. And as Jess has shared, there were those 4 objectives. So now going on to the lessons and our experiences in using HCD, I think by nature, HCD is a process that really puts people at the center of this work. It's a way of understanding people in depth, not just surface, but really understanding where are people coming from, why do they do the things that they do, and what would motivate them to change. So when we started, I think we had hypothesized, though not written down, but I think in our minds we're thinking maybe the design of the Blair ventilated improved pit latrine is something that is not preferred by rural communities, and they would prefer maybe a different design. Excuse me. That could still serve the purposes in terms of improving sanitation, protecting flies from leaving the toilets and getting into the households. So we thought maybe there was another design that people would prefer, that they would want, so that many people within communities would be able to build and use latrines in their communities. But then when we went in and we spoke to participants, we were proved wrong. The design was not so much the issue, but it was also an issue of when people were now executing, when you compare what is recommended by the Ministry of Health and the government of Zimbabwe in terms of the stages for constructing the Blair improved ventilated pit latrine, people did not understand the need to have a roof, the need to have a vent pipe so that you can trap flies, you can allow for air circulation so that the toilet does not smell and it becomes more user-friendly. So in our interactions with communities, we're also able to use a lot of qualitative research methodologies. We use the sanitation ladder cards, the build a loo cards. We use the journey mapping to try and understand the process that people and households took until they had a latrine for those households that did have latrines. In that way, we're able to identify what was motivating them to construct those latrines and what were the barriers that they faced and what was their understanding of doing whatever that they were doing. And this is where we got to understand issues like what Jess has mentioned, that young girls would prefer to have a door on the latrine. And this is because the latrine is not only used for safe disposal of feces, but it's also used as a bathroom for majority of the rural households. But again, having a solid door would block air circulation, which would affect the design of the Blair ventilated pit latrine. So all these interactions helped us to understand. So as Takunda, we are using the community-led total sanitation approach of triggering and motivating households and communities to build latrines. And what we also were able to discover is that where we have villages or communities or clusters where there was good leadership and village health would work with their people and follow up, that actually also helped to ensure that majority of people did build latrines. And like Jess has also mentioned, we're also able to see that despite the fact that Takunda had planned and also many other programs, and the Ministry of Health itself trains latrine builders in constructing the Blair ventilated improved pit latrine. What we also found is that these builders were behaving like just construction people who waited to be contracted, and then when they are contracted, they go and build as per the request of whoever will have contracted them, even if it meant going against the design features of the BVIP. They'll do it because this was the contractor. But what we saw was an opportunity of actually these builders to serve not just as contractors, but also people that could mobilize for latrine construction while at the same time doing their work. So I think just all these interactive opportunities helped us to sort of try and see how best we can work with our communities to try and improve the situation, which led to the development of the materials that Jess has talked about. And we're also able to test some of these things like the social and behavior change materials that are targeted at the latrine builders, the suppliers, the private sector suppliers that are producing the materials that are being used to construct latrines. For example, one of the discoveries was that majority of elderly household members had problems with squatting because of their legs and other issues. So people preferred buying toilet seats, but also just to have a design that looks like the urban latrines that are in Zimbabwe. But what we also found was that the ones that are on the market are not the appropriate ones. So we are engaging private sector in doing all this work. So in our experiences, what we've learned and seen as working is working very closely with the government if you are to ensure sustainability and to ensure that whatever work you're doing is in line with what is being promoted and can be scaled up beyond just where a project is working is essential. Liaising and working with private sector because they are the suppliers of the materials that are needed anyway in constructing latrines and sustainable use within communities. We also found that to be very important. So I'll say in a nutshell, this has been our experiences in using the HCD for WASH. It's a whole lot more that we've learned that we're going to put in our program as we continue to implement Takunda program and trying to see if what we're doing in WASH can be sustainable beyond the program. Thank you. I hand back to Melissa.
Thank you, Delilah. And as Max mentioned already in the chat, all of these tools that Delilah and Jess also mentioned They are in the examples and inspiration, and also in the toolkit, in the part of the tools and resources that you can access through the hcd4wash.org resource that we have created for all of you. So now we will have some time for questions. We have a Q&A that has been open. I know, Helen, that you asked a question before about, can you share the tools? We share the website already. And again, it's the website is hcd4wash.org. Oh, I'm writing it now. So, oh, I misspelled it. I'm so sorry. hcd4wash.org. So then you can access there. Thank you, Nicole. So then you can access the tools and the resources. There is a question directed to Jess. Jess, do you want to take that one? From Ariful Islam?
Yeah. Hello, Arif. It's good to see your face. Arif and I worked together for a long time, so it's lovely to have this question. So questions around, really specifically from the Takunda example around price affordability and supply chain. Yes, the price affordability, as I described very briefly, we decided to put 3 different examples of different levels of the latrine. So one is a basic, which is a very, very, very cheap one, which basically can be built with 2 bags of cement and bricks that are homemade. So it's an extremely, extremely low cost version. And then all the way up to kind of the high cost version, which has tinted windows. It's quite fancy. So there's quite a range there. Around supply chain constraints and considering sustainability. So we are working with the suppliers because the toilets in Zimbabwe are primarily made of cement and brick. The supply chain constraints are not the same as you'd have in countries like Bangladesh. But we are still working with the local suppliers around sustainability and making sure that those supply chains are consistent. The biggest challenge would be pieces like the squat or the chamber seats, for example. Yeah. And then I see Riazur, while I'm on the line, this is also a specific question about the Takunda project and for disabled people. So the latrine design has been designed for general disability, but it has not been specifically designed for individuals with a specific type of disability. And so this is something that is being looked into for the next kind of iteration of the program, but it's a very good example. So it does have basic features for kind of regular life cycle disability, but not for specific disabilities that might require specific augmentations to the design. Yeah. Great. So passing it back to you, Melissa.
Yeah. Thank you, Jess. And then thank you for all your comments about the website. It means a lot to us because we have been putting a lot of time and basically our hearts into making this website accessible and useful, and that for your likeness. So thank you for all the messages, encouraging messages for us. And also we have another person that says, this looks to be an incredible resource. Well done for bringing it together. Will it continue to have new case studies, tools, etc. that added to it? Who would we approach if we have tools, case studies, which might be useful to have added to the site in the future? There's a feature in the website that you can submit materials, or if you have encountered a bug or something that is not working, you can let us know. And there's a possibility for us to change it. I have to say also that, I don't know, Jess, if you would like, sorry, Nicole, if you would like also to clarify some of the content about the new case studies and tools that are going to be added.
Yeah, this is definitely meant to still be a live resource, and we'd love to add more tools and resources. We plan to add a few more from ProWash on the work in Zimbabwe, in Niger, and in Bangladesh, but we also welcome resources from partners that can be shared widely. So as Melissa mentioned, there's a box at the bottom, or you can reach out to us and you can send them to us via email. We can work to upload them.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Fernando, I think you have a question. Do you want to pop it in the chat, or do you want to say it out loud? Right. Oh, I know. I can see that Jess is already replying to Shale. So thanks for such a great effort. My concern is HCD mostly improves demand side work, but how could you improve supply side work? Jess, you're already taking that one.
Yeah, I can. I'll stop typing and just speak because I think that's easier. That's a great question. I fully agree that I see often HCD really focused on demand. But if you notice in the Takunda example, both for our create phase and our deliver phase, we split our activities between the demand and the supply side. And not only demand and supply, but also I'd like to add a third word, which is support. So the demand side, the supply side, and then also the supporting side. So how does local government, how does microfinance, how do other organizations and support infrastructure make this work as well? And so, I mean, this is just my own personal practice of HCD. I think we just need to be careful about who we dive deep with and who we speak to. If it's human-centered design, we have to look also at all of the different humans who are involved. And that involves the supply chain as well as the supporting functions as well. But that gets into a little bit more detail. I hope that's useful for you. Back over to you, Melissa.
Thank you. Also adding to that point, Shale, I think as just mentioned, or I think in my experience also has been that since HCD is shifted the focus to the user, people tend to see it more as the demand side. However, when Max was presenting in the website, you can also see that when we talk about HCD, we talk about the desirability, the viability, and the feasibility side. So we have to see the problem through these different lenses. And one of them is desirability, which might be the demand side. But what about viability and feasibility that has to do with supply and also with the other stakeholders? Like what is financially viable? What is technically feasible? So by looking at these three different angles, then the idea is that you are not missing any important stakeholders. We clarify that also in one of the videos. So if you go, I think it's under HCD, Learn HCD or HCD for WASH, the video, it talks about specifically how you can see this, you can use these different lenses. And there's
Great.
another.
I think we'll have to go ahead and close. We're almost at the top of the hour. So thank you so much. And maybe Melissa, or you can go ahead and answer Fernando's question in the chat box in the meantime. So on behalf of ProWASH, I really want to thank IDE for this partnership and all of the work that you've done over the past year to develop this resource center. We've really appreciated your openness and your willingness to share. You have over a decade of experience in using HCD for WASH, and so your willingness and openness to share this with other partners is really very much appreciated. While this project is wrapping up and ProWASH is closing out, we are still excited to have opportunities in the future to continue to make IDE to make HCD more accessible to WASH practitioners. I also want to take a moment to thank all of the Resilience Food Security Activity staff, the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance team, and all of the other partners and key informants that participated in the HCD process during the creation of the website. Your participation and feedback into the design decisions was really instrumental to make sure that we have a very practitioner-friendly, useful tool that moving forward. Through ProWASH, in addition to the experience shared by Delilah and Jess, we've also had an opportunity to support applied research activities on sanitation that leveraged human-centered design in Niger and Bangladesh. And we're also excited that these stories are being shared through the online resource center. We know that creating a resource center is just one step in applying human-centered design for more sustainable sanitation. So we really look forward to continuing to learn with you on how best this approach can be leveraged through the diverse contexts in which you're all working. We look forward to hearing your feedback, what additional tools and case studies you would like us to add. We look forward to receiving those through the website or via email. We're happy to look at them and see how we can add those to the Resource Center to really make sure that this is a center, a resource that's available for all practitioners. And so thank you so much for today, for attending today. We hope that you're able to go out and enjoy the rest of the year, but also think about this Resource Center in the new year and share it with your colleagues. And as always, we're very open to feedback. So thank you so much. Thank you, IDE. Thank you, Delilah and Jess, for also sharing the experience of the Takunda. And thanks everyone for coming today.